Thank you for having me here. I'll do a presentation about the Joomla database, and I try to to give information in a broad way. So it's not only for the real specialists, but also people who use Joomla will have more knowledge about the database, and because of that, also how Joomla itself works. So yeah, I'm Peter Martin. I'm from Nijmegen, the Netherlands. And it's in a small town in the east of the Netherlands, near the German border. And the Netherlands is in the west of the European Union. I'm a developer since 2005. And in 2005, I also started with db8.nl. I do Joomla support, website design and installation, and also a lot of custom programming. Last year, I created a website called thebestwebsite.com. It's one Joomla website in 5 different languages and under 5 different domain names. I have the best website is in 5 languages like Spanish, French, German, Dutch, and English. And it's just one Joomla website. It's Joomla 3 because back then Joomla 4 was not out yet. And the plugin I used for that was created by someone else, and I changed it for PHP 7.4 and Joomla 3.9, and it's available on GitHub. In 2018, I co-founded Data2 EU, which is a software as a service, and it's a GDPR tool. In Europe, we have the privacy law, and you have to document everything around privacy. And with our tool, it's easier to do. And with the same person, I started data2site.com. And we have a tool called D2 Content. It's for Joomla 3. We are working on Joomla 4 right now. And it's for making the backend of the articles easier to use, because you can just design your own backend view for the articles. So in this presentation, I will show you some stuff about databases, and I will use Joomla 4 and especially only the core of Joomla 4, so no extensions. I will do a small comparison with WordPress as well, and I also only use the core, so no plugins. And yeah, that's it. So I will tell something about MySQL in general, about database normalization, because that knowledge is really nice to have when you look at the Joomla database tables. I will show you how the Joomla database tables work a bit. I will compare it a bit with WordPress, and finally show some differences between the Joomla 3 and 4 database. I won't go into Joomla code, because the code of Joomla 4 also changed a lot. Like now you have, it's called, you can make your data that you put into the database safer with some sort of name. I've just forgot. Doesn't really matter, because I will do the database only in this presentation. So databases in general. You all know how a spreadsheet looks like, which can contain a lot of data elements. A database does the same. It has database elements, but it's built for a specific purpose. So the Joomla database is built for a CMS. And the data in it should be logical, coherent, and internally consistent. So there are a couple of principles. Each data element is stored in a field. The fields are combined in a table. And items in one column are all of the same type. And each row has the same number of columns. And each row should be uniquely identifiable. Most of the Joomla records have an ID, and some don't, but you can find unique fields by combining 2 or 3 of those fields. And in a database, there's no implied order in the rows. You can, of course, make an order, and I will show you in a second. So SQL is structured query language. In Joomla, we have Postgres and MySQL. MySQL is also currently MariaDB, which is a fork of MySQL. In the past, we also had MS SQL, which is Microsoft SQL. And it was contributed by Microsoft, but there was no support anymore. So it's not in a Joomla 4. If you look at databases, databases are just files. Some files store data, some files store information about where the data is stored. And if you look on a server, on a Linux server, you can find all the MySQL tables in a folder called var lib MySQL. And you can change stuff in it, but it's really not the right thing to do, because if the database is in use, then you'll get database corruption. So you have a couple of database management tools like PHP-MyAdmin, which is really famous. You have dbeaver, it's an open source tool, or SQL Pro, etc. Of course, if you are using an IDE, I use PHP Storm myself, an IDE to code stuff. Then you can also connect to the database and do database queries, etc., right from your IDE. For Linux hardcore people, you have the command line interface, so you can log in into the database directly on the command line and do all kinds of commands. I sometimes do it, but I mostly use PHP-MyAdmin and PHP Storm, and of course Joomla itself. Because if you look at Joomla, it's also a sort of database management system. You manage articles, users, categories, menu items, all from the backend, and it changes things in the database. It's not really a database management system, but it manages stuff in the database. So about database normalization. If you look at the database table, for instance, first normalization. You can have all kinds of information in the database, all kinds of data, but to structure it in a way that it complies with some sort of something they call normal forms, then you can reduce the data redundancy and also improve the integrity of your data. And let me show you an example. So what you can see here is a mock-up, a made-up. It's called articles, this table. Every column of every row has an ID. So every row is uniquely identifiable. You have titles, you have descriptions, that's the text in the article, and you have a category, which I have 3 categories, 3 articles in the Joomla category and 1 in open source facts. And the Joomla category is about articles about Joomla. It's written by Peter, and his email address is joomla@dba.nl. So what you can see here is I have a lot of redundant information. That Joomla Rocks is about something which is in the category Joomla, which is about articles about Joomla. And Joomla 4 is also in Joomla, which is articles about Joomla. It's too much information. If I would change the articles, instead of articles, make nice articles about Joomla, then I have to do it in 3 different rows. So this is one of the reasons that you use normalization. And if you look at Joomla, you can see that Joomla has a category ID and an author ID. So information about the category itself is not put in the records for the articles. Information about the author is not put in the records for the articles. Instead, you have an extra table called categories, which stores the ID of the category, which stores the title of the category and the description. And that Joomla Rocks and Joomla 4 are both in the category with ID 2, means that if I do a combination and join with tables, I can just get the same information as I showed before on the sheet before, but this is more optimized. The same with the author. Author 43 is Peter with his email address, so no redundant information. This is called a one-to-one relation. One category ID is to one other category. Here's the information about the category. And this is also the case of also the reason why Joomla can have only every article can only have one category and not multiple categories because of this. Tags are different because tags are stored in a different way. And there you have, can have one tag, can have multiple articles, and articles can have multiple tags, but category is just a one-to-one relation. So we have also many-to-many relations, and that's the case for the user table. I'm a user in the database. It's called number 42, and my name is Peter, and I am a registered user, but also a super user in this database. So if you look at another table called user groups, it has public, registered, author, super users, and more. But I am a super user and also a registered user. So there is another table called user group map, which stores the ID of the user, in this case 42, with all the groups that the person is in. So I am in registered and super user. So this is a many-to-many relation. Then something else with Joomla, you have ordering in the database. The records itself are not in order. I mean, when I create new records, it's just auto increment. So the next will be 4 and then 5, but there is no real order. However, if you look in the content table, where the articles are stored, you have a field called ordering, and it says 3, 4, 1, 2. So Linux rules will be the first article, and D2 content will be the second, etc. If you order the articles by ordering. But SQL, you can also say I would like to order by name, by title, or by created date. But order in articles is just with a number. This is a one-dimensional order. There is also something called 2 dimensions, and that's with nesting. With nesting, you can have order, but also you know which items are under which other items, categories, menus, menu items, etc. Those are all nested data. So you can see here I have a category called content. It has an ID 2. It's parent 1, so it's the most highest in the content category. The root will be, yeah, that one. So it's left and LFT and RGT means left and right, and also level. So you can see here that Joomla, OS Facts and News are all children of the parent 2. So all of the content, and they are all on the second level. So these are all child categories of content. And here you can see the order. And to explain something about left and right, I would like to show you this sheet. It's from an excellent website by Mike Hillier. And he has a lot of these kinds of slides, but also with all kinds of SQL queries that you can do to find information about it. So if you look at electronics, it's the main category, the parent category of everything else. It has a 1 and a 20. This is the left side, which is 1. This is the right side, which is 20. If you look underneath it, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 subcategories. But you can also calculate it without even looking at the schedule with a scheme. You just look at the left and the right. So you subtract the left from the right. So 20 minus 1 is 19. You subtract another one, which is 18. You divide it by 2 because you have 2 sides, which means 9. So there are 9 child categories here. And for instance, if you look at a category like LCD, it has 5 and 6. There's no number between it. So therefore, there are no child categories. So this is the end in the chain. And this is used a lot in Joomla. It's yeah, it's really powerful to store information with nested sets. So now let's look at Joomla itself, the Joomla 4 database. I would like to do some things in Joomla and to look what happens in the database. So I will add a new user group. I will add a new level. I create a user. I will add permission for the user to log into the backend of the website. I will create 2 admin modules, and I will tell you later why. I will create a category, an article, and a menu item. And this is all you need for a new person to do stuff, and they can only do this stuff in the future. So let's meet Jane. Jane is working in the marketing department, and she is responsible for writing the news articles, which are public, and also for the strategic marketing articles that are only for internal use. So we have two different levels. So we will start creating a new user group for Jane. The user group will be called marketing group. And in Joomla, you go to users, groups. So here you groups, and then you create a new item with new. And in this case, we call it marketing group. And because it's, we put it in this case on a registered. Sometimes it's better to use public as a parent. In this case, I start with registered. So what happens in the Joomla database when you create a new user group? Well, there's a table called user groups. By the way, here you can see my prefix, which is called YOS. And YOS used to be the old Joomla prefix by default when you installed Joomla. But I think since 2.5 or maybe even earlier, it became random. So you should use something else because this is too obvious. In my presentation, I will use YOS because it's yeah, easy. I created a new parent group and called marketing group. It's in the YOS user groups. And what you can see here, I have an ID 10, and you will see that later on in this presentation. And I also have a left, which is 15, and 16, which is the right, meaning there is no subcategory beneath marketing group. And oh yeah, it's in level 2. So I'm sorry, it says parent 2. And I know that the 2 is there for registered users. So 2, the registered users, is the parent category of this group. Something else, Joomla has an action log since the 3.9 version, which has the privacy suite. And all the actions that you do as a super administrator or as administrator are logged in the action log table. And here you can see that I created a new user group. So after the user group, I will create a new access level. So in users, I will go to access levels and I will create a new access level, viewing access level. The level is called marketing level because it's clear that it's marketing, and I will assign the marketing group to it. So people who will be added to the marketing group can view stuff in the database in the Joomla site that are assigned to the marketing level. So what happens is there is a table called view levels, and there will be a new level called marketing level, and 10 is my the user group. I think therefore it will be added here. If there are more, it will be here with commas. So the action log again, because I did something in the backend. And now we get something else, the finder types. So in Joomla 4, we have a search, which is called the finder, the smart search. In Joomla 3, we already had it, but in Joomla 4, it's the default search. ComSearch is no more, and therefore the finder is used. But the finder indexes everything on the fly. So when you create something new, it will be indexed. And in this case, I'm not sure why at this place it happens, but in this, when I create a new viewing level, yeah, the finder is activated, and there are a couple of things added to it, the finder types. Now I'm ready to create a new user, so I will add Jane to the user group, and she will get assigned to the registered and also to the marketing group. So now she has 2 groups. What happens in the background is we have the YOS users, and the users table will store the name, the email address, the hashed password, and the registration date, etc. And Jane is user 770, just to remember later on. Because we have a user group map. User 770 will be assigned to user group 2, which is the registered users, and to 10, which is our new marketing group. So this will be in the database. And of course, action log will record that I created a new user. Next, we want to give Jane access to the backend to log in and to do stuff, to create articles, etc. So what we do, we go to System, User Permissions, and then to Settings. And then the global configuration, we change the permissions. We go to the marketing group, and we define that the marketing group is allowed to do admin login. After this, Jane can log into the backend, but she cannot do anything because we did not create any modules, or we did not assign other components to the marketing group or to the marketing level. So we do that here. We are going to System, User Permission, Settings, but you also can go to the articles and do the settings over there in Options, and then the last is Permissions. Then you go to the same place. We create permissions for the marketing group. We tell Joomla that the marketing group is allowed to access the admin interface of the articles of content in the backend. They are also allowed to create, edit the state like published, unpublished, and trashed, and edit their own. What happens in the background? Joomla has an assets table, and the assets table is used to store the ACL permissions, not the front-end viewing permissions, but what people or groups are able to do. And what you can see here is that we have, for instance, a record called with ID 8, and it's a core manage. It used to be that user group 6 is able to do that, but now we also have user group 10 that is able to do it, because 1 means yes, it's Boolean for yes, true. So that's stored like this. Of course, action logs again. And in the table extensions, there's also something changed. Because in Joomla 4, we have the workflow. So by default, when you create new users, I think the workflow is enabled, there is a parameter here, and it says 0, so it's disabled by default. But the Joomla has custom fields also, and it's enabled by default. So these are stored in the extensions table for content and config. We're halfway there. We just have to do 4 other things. First, the admin modules. So if a user from the marketing group that has marketing level logs into the backend, they don't see anything. That's because we have a title and a toolbar that is assigned to the special group, and we are not part of the special group. So what we do, we go to System and we select the administrator modules. We duplicate the title and the toolbar, and we assign those to the viewing level, marketing level, and marketing level both. So now I have 2 titles and 2 toolbar modules. So if you go to the articles in the backend, you can see the word articles here, and this is the title bar, and below it you can see the actions that you can perform, which is done by toolbar module. So if you look at the tables in the database, we just created 2 new modules, a title and a toolbar module, and you could see here that the level is 7, the access level. So there's also something called assets again, because to store stuff about that, but it's empty. We just create references to it. And we have the modules menu, because modules are assigned to menus, and here you can assign them to certain menus. But in this case, those modules are assigned to all the menus in the backend for this special group that we created. So now, almost there. Let's create 2 categories. One is called news, for public news, and the other is marketing news. And we assign it to a marketing level because only internal people should be able to look at that. So just, yeah, you create new and you create those and you assign them to a special level, access level. So in the database, you have the categories table. There will be added 2 new records, and they will have a parent ID, which is 1. So they are both under the root category. And you will have left and right and also the parent, etc. So that's all here. Yeah, there's no submenu under news or marketing yet. If you do, then these will change. So the assets again, because in the future we would like to maybe define what people can do in it, in this, and also the action log again. And because categories should be indexed, therefore the finder will create 2 links because we have 2 categories. And those finder links will index links to the category with ID 8 and with category ID 9. The news and the marketing category. So the other thing is there will be created link terms, and we have the finite taxonomy. And the finite taxonomy will have a new type called category in it. And will be done more, like the finite taxonomy map will link the finder item to the taxonomy map. And we also have finite terms. That means all the words that are in titles and in the description will be added here. Oh, this is also very nice. Joomla has a versioning. It also works for categories. And with the versioning, when you create something, when you save it for the first time, in the history, there will also be a reference. And the reference will store the whole content of it as JSON. So when you save it and you change something, you save it again. Oh no, I made a mistake. Then you can go back using this table. So we are almost there. We need to create actually 2. One is for the public and one is for the marketing. And when we create it, when we create those articles, something happens in the content table. There was no content yet, so the first article is ID is 1, the second is 2. It's also connected with assets ID, so we will see the assets table again. And we have the title and the text, like I read the news today, etc. And of course, the user, the access level for the auto marketing is different from it's not public anymore, it's set to marketing. So action log again, it always happens when you change things. And we have the assets. I just told you that we would have assets 91, 92. So here we have 91, 92. And here we can define stuff like we don't do anything yet with it. So we have to find the links. So we already had 1 and 2 as IDs. So now we have 2 new links because we have 2 new articles. And these are the URLs to the articles. And yeah, here a lot of information is there. But the terms again, we have the taxonomy again. And here we have, besides the content of the article, like type article, we also have that the author will be stored in the taxonomy. And we have taxonomy map, which maps the articles with the taxonomy here. Define terms. So all the words in the articles are stored as separate records. So the 2 articles will have maybe 100 different records, because I use the word Beatles, I use the word workflow for the marketing article, and those are all separate records. And of course, we have the history table again, because content also uses the history table. And this is new. Joomla 4 has a workflow, and there will be created records for all the articles for the workflow if you use it. I mean, if you don't use it, there will be records, and if you use it, you can use it. I will tell you later on about workflow. Finally, the menus. When you create new menus, I create one for the marketing news, which is marketing level, and the news is just public news. Same as with categories, you create new, and you assign it to access level, public, or marketing level. So what happens in the database? There is a table called a menu, and the menu is of a certain type. In this case, the menu, main menu. And I put my information in it, and I have left and right again, so 43, 44, 45, 46. So there's nothing beneath those both. And this is how the menus are stored. And of course, that's it. Now we are done. So Jane will be able to log into the backend to write news articles, to write marketing news that is for internal use only. And the marketing people, if they are assigned to the marketing group and they log in into the front end, they can read the marketing news as well, and just visitors can see the news. So this is in an overview how the database of Joomla works when you do things in the database. I mean in Joomla itself. So let's compare it with another system called WordPress. If you compare WordPress with Joomla, only the core, and look at the tables, then Joomla has more tables, 69. WordPress has only 12 tables. WordPress is smaller, it's 2.1 megabyte. And if you look into PHP My Admin, you can see the WordPress database. The WP options has 1.5 megabyte, but that's not when you install it. When you install it, you just have 64 kilobyte, and I think 0 or 0 records. So if you install WordPress and you log in into the front end or back end, then it will retrieve all kinds of information, like all system messages about updates, which are stored in the WP options table. So I just showed you what happens in Joomla. Now I will show briefly what happens in WordPress. I will try to create a group, a level, user, permissions, admin module, a category, article, and menu item. So first of all, group. Oh no, meet WESLEY. He works at the marketing department that has a WordPress website. He writes news articles and also internal marketing news. So we need a group for the marketing group, for registered, and also for, we need a new group. You can do that in WordPress. You cannot create your own user groups. Well, okay, access levels then. I want to have different access levels. You cannot do that in WordPress by default. I mean, there are probably plugins that you can install, but I was comparing it with the core. So let's just create a user then. We create a user called Jack. We give him a role which is called editor. And if you look at the roles in WordPress, it's just like Joomla 1.5 or before that. Because then Joomla also had fixed roles. And now it's totally, you can create whatever you want and define your own roles and names. But in WordPress, you only have a couple. And what you can see here is the name of the role and the ID behind it. So the administrator is 10, but the editor is role number 7. So when this is stored in the database, we have WP users. You can compare it with the Joomla users, the JOS users. And what you can see here, you have the login name, you have the hashed password, which is great. And also when the user registered, it's here. But there is no time when they last logged in. That's not stored here, but yeah, anyway. There's also a user metadata table where they store all the pieces of information, like first name, last name, etc., as separate entities, separate records. And here you can also see WP user level, that's set to 7. So his editor. What I don't understand is why they also have the WP capabilities. It also says editor somewhere. I mean, if your user level is 7, why do it again in another? But yeah, it probably has a reason, but I don't know that reason. So let's create permissions. Well, you can't because the permissions are hard-coded in the roles. So you cannot configure permissions yourself. You just assign a role, and then the user can only do that. So, okay, we are halfway there. We only have to do 4 other things. The admin modules, well, in WordPress, you call it widgets, and you can probably install widgets that are accessible in the backend and do stuff in the backend of your WordPress website. I don't know. I have not looked into that. I don't use it here anyway because we don't have groups and permissions. So yeah, I don't use it here. So, but I want to use categories, and I want to have 2 categories, one for the public and one for the marketing level. You cannot do that in default WordPress. You can set it public or for registered people and maybe a couple of other things, but you cannot assign it to certain levels. So, but what happens if you just create categories? Well, there is a table called WP options. It stores everything. In this case, the word category children, and yeah, I'm not really sure why it does it like that. We have a couple of new WP terms. They have a terms table where they store news and marketing news. They have also a taxonomy table. And what is really weird, I think, is they have something called count. It says 0, 0. I will come to that later. Then we have, I'll create 2 new articles. One should be public on the marketing level, but yeah, that's not possible. So it's only for registered users, probably. And what happens? You create posts. And I made a couple of mistakes because I wrote something, I pressed save, I wrote something, pressed save. So it's just 2 articles, but one is saved 2 times, the other one is saved 3 times. It's all in the same table. And it will create relationships. What you can see here is number 5 and number 8. These are the first time I created such an article. And the ones with 6, 7, and 9, those are revisions. So it only stores the first one here in the relationships table. And then you have taxonomy. So now you can see that it changed. The category, which is category 2 and also category 3, they both have now 1 article in it. I don't know why they store the number of articles in a category record. I mean, when you do a join and you do a count, you can easily count everything. So yeah, I don't know why. For me, it looks a bit weird. Anyway, let's create a new menu, public. And we also want to do something for the marketing level, which is not possible. So yes, let's do it just for public. And this is just with the core. So there will be a new thing called main menu, because it's a new menu. In Joomla, you have the same. You have menu type, and here's just a reference in WP terms. We have a taxonomy. That's we create new menu. That's for the place nav menu, and yeah, I'm not really sure what's doing here. I think it's user meta, like who have access or who created it or something like that. Yeah, I'm not really a WordPress expert, but so I don't know why it does stuff in the user meta. But we are not there yet. We have to assign a menu to a location. In this case, WordPress has a template. It's called a theme. And you can only assign menus to certain parts, right? 1 or 2 parts in the theme. The theme has to support it. So in this case, I assign my menus, my menus to a certain part called the primary location. I created 2 menu items. And then you can see that it has post meta with all kinds of information about those categories. And this is the other one. Oh yeah, this is also something weird. There's also something in WP posts, and here it stores the date and the name of the article of the category I just created. Or no, sorry, the menu item I just created. But what you also can see here is a hard-coded URL. So if I would decide to change the domain name to put this website on the place, like on a server, I have to change these manually, or probably install a plugin that does it for me automatically. I know that I keep a backup. This is available for Joomla. It's also available for WordPress. And if you use that, it will change these for the new server. So yeah, I can recommend that if you want to use WordPress and want to change it on a different location. What's also a bit weird is you can see post date, but also post date GMT. The post date is with the date. The GMT date is just 0. So I think this is a legacy field that's not used anymore. So I find it a bit weird that menu items are recorded in the posts, that you have hard-coded URLs in the database, that you have GMT dates and normal dates. And oh yeah, we have to also do when we create in the menu, it's also in the posts. So we have to what's this again? Oh yeah, here we have also the 2 links to the pages. And yeah, we also have something in the taxonomy after we changed it. And oh yeah, you can see now that the nav menu, it changed for 0 to 2. So now we have 2 childs underneath this category, which yeah, it's a bit weird to store it in a database while you can do it with a database query. So to conclude this, WordPress has a lot of tables. They use one table called WP options. They use it for all the settings, for the URLs, titles, install plugins, but also it's yeah, also for all the messages, like there is a new plugin available, a new version. They have a WP posts, which is for the posts, for the revisions, for something called pages. In Joomla 1.0, we had static pages. You can compare it with pages. And also the menu items are all just in one table. And then we have the WP terms. And the terms is used to store the categories, the menus, and the tags. So 3 different content items are stored all in one table. And here you can see that WordPress was started as a blogging platform. They have WP comments by default, and they changed later to a CMS. And you can also see they have WP links, but that's for custom links, and it's deprecated, so not used anymore. So yeah, this is how yeah, how WordPress organizes the data. And yeah, of course, I'm not objective, but if I look at this table and I look at Joomla's table, then I prefer Joomla's organization of data. To talk about Joomla 4, the database, we also probably want to know what's different between Joomla 3, the database. So there are a lot of changes. This is the last part. So Joomla 3 had 78 tables, Joomla 4 only 69. So we reduced the tables a bit. And we also reduced the size a bit, but we have more rows, more information, more data. So I have only a couple of tables that changed. So in all the tables, like contact, details, content, in the past, we had a field called X reference. It's not there anymore in Joomla 4. In the past, we had something called core log searches. It was for com search, but because com search has been removed, this table has been removed as well. We have more extensions, more plugins, etc. in Joomla 4. So therefore, we have more rows. So Joomla 4 doesn't have the com search anymore, but it has the com finder, which is a smart search. And we have some new tables in it. We have the finder logging and the finder link terms. Actually, the finder link terms was already there in Joomla 3, but then it was in 16 tables. It was called finder link terms 0, finder link terms 1, etc. until finder links terms F. That was the last table. Those all have been removed, and now it's just one table. And in the past, we have something called UCM, like Unified Content Management, probably, history. it's not there anymore, and now it's just called history. We have something called mail templates. It's new because Joomla has something called mail templates, where you can create notification templates for your emails, and those are stored in the mail templates. We have more menus. We have more modules and more styles, etc. We have something called template overrides. It's a new database table. And if you look at the other tables, the template styles, in the past we had 2 front ends and 2 back end templates. And in the current Joomla version, you have only 1 in the front and in the back end. Of course, you can install your own template, but this way it's easier to change stuff for Joomla. So if there is an error on your website, just use the default front end template to look if it's template related, or maybe if it's Joomla related. In the past, we had something called UTF-8 conversion, and it's not necessary anymore, and it has been removed. Then finally, there are a couple of new tables. The first one is a web authn credentials. It's for the API of Joomla. Joomla 4 has an API, and to access the API, you need credentials, and those are stored in this table. And of course, we have the workflows. So in the past, you could create an article and make it unpublished by default, and someone else could look at it, and if it was correct, they could publish it. With Joomla 4, you can make it like an official workflow. So people can only publish articles when they are in a certain level, and you can just create your own workflow for publishing. So maybe an article has to be created by some writer, and it has to be checked by the marketing and the legal department before publishing it. And therefore, we need some database tables to arrange that. So here I say select everything from presentation. And if you know MySQL, you will know that I will do the 50 minutes I just did again, because it's everything. So it's not like that. Just I wanted to do a summary, but I didn't know how to do a MySQL statement for a summary. Anyway, I told you something about the MySQL databases in general and about management of databases. I taught you something about normalization, about the ordering of how Joomla orders records, and also how Joomla uses nested sets with left and right. I taught you something about what happens if you do stuff in Joomla, like create a new user group, viewing levels, users' permissions, modules, categories, articles, and menu items. I compared it a bit with WordPress. I looked what happens there when you do the same stuff, or when you try to do the same stuff with the core. And I just showed you some database changes from Joomla 3 to 4, that we have some new tables, and some have been removed, and some have changed a bit. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and